Unemployment, food security is what I was talking about. People have to struggle with infectious diseases, education. There are macro and microeconomic policies that are really out of the control of individuals. But the challenge, and the reason why it's so hard, is if you get a number of these things right, but you don't get enough of them right to go over the tipping point, you really haven't made progress. And that's been the challenge that we've struggled with over the years. But notwithstanding that, I would argue there have been world-changing accomplishments in the last couple of decades. People, you often hear when you raise issues, if I tell people I work in international development, you hear, isn't that sending money down foreign rat holes? Did people accomplish anything? Nothing's really happened. And I would say a lot has happened that doesn't get reported. For instance, since 1981, the percentage of people living in extreme poverty has declined dramatically. People working in international development know this, they see it, but it doesn't get reported. And that change from 44 to 13% is something that is the largest change we've seen in recorded history. Children in school, 90% of children in school around the world. I started working in this field in the late 80s, and the figure was closer to 40, 50%. That's a dramatic change, dramatic improvement. 2 billion people gained access to clean water between 1990 and 2010. That again is transformational for people's lives on a day-to-day basis. Of course, that's not to say that big challenges don't remain. We still have almost 800 million people who go to bed hungry at night around the world, and that's really something that's, in many ways, for those of us working in this area, and the other speakers know, is despicable. It's something that we really need to address. 5% of children in the world die before their 5th birthday. That figure is a big improvement over other years, but it's still something that is really a global challenge that we need to address. It was supposed to go a lot faster and smoother. It's all about the clicker. Life expectancy, 61 years in lower income countries. In upper income countries, it's in the 80s. Not to say there's not great variation. Even in the triangle area between certain, I've seen people show me maps of zip codes in the triangle area, and you can see great variation in the United States. But that figure is very troubling that it still stays on average 61%. It's 61 years in lower income countries. And the literacy rate is still only 50% in the developing world, despite the big advances we've made in putting numbers of people in school. But I think we are at a stage again where I think we can be bold about our aspirations. So I'm going to show a couple of slides about what the U.S. government is doing, since that's the experience I've had. In recent years, the administration has launched Feed the Future, a program I worked on. And the idea that we launch a program and say we're going to address the challenge not only of feeding the 800 million people who go to bed hungry, but to feed the projected 9 billion people in the world by 2050. It's at a level of boldness and aspiration that we really didn't see before. I think that's building on the big changes that we've seen, big accomplishments that we've seen. Another government initiative launched in recent years is Power Africa, which is really intended to think about how do you move Africa from being a country that lives in the dark to a country where people have access to energy and electricity that we all take for granted. Again, something that years ago people didn't think that we could have aspirations at that level. PEPFAR. Now, a lot of people here, I suspect, work in the health field. It's a big sector in RTP. I know when I started in development, the idea that you could get people across Africa, across Latin America and Asia on antiretrovirals, people thought that's nonsensical. And now, not only do we have large numbers of people on antiretrovirals saving millions of lives, but people honestly talk about the idea of we can live in an AIDS, we can see in front of us the possibility of an AIDS-free generation. And lastly, the Sustainable Development Goals were adopted last year in September 2015 by the global community, which set out an agenda for development globally. And again, when I started in the 80s working in this field, if you said, let's set a target for ending hunger and poverty, people would have laughed at you. And now globally, people really think this is achievable. We're not that there will not be a single poor person in the world, but we really are at a stage where we have the tools, we have the energy, we have the will that we can talk about on a massive scale, having this kind of impact. So that was it. That's hopefully less than 5 minutes.